community, how is it that we can find peace in a troubled world? How can we find peace in the midst of a world that is at war at times? How can we find peace in the midst of chaos, uncertainty, even personal struggles? Is it even possible to find peace in the midst of this world? How many of you can relate to a sense of maybe a little bit of disconnect in this season where everything is supposed to be joy and peace and love and hope, and yet how many of you are stressed? Find yourself stressed a little bit? Maybe it's just mild level stressors like, do you have a gift for everyone on your list? Or maybe it's a little higher level, you're trying to juggle kids and work and parents and all these sort of things. Or maybe it's like high level existential stress, right? There's lots of reasons to be stressed and overwhelmed in the world. Is it even possible to find peace in the midst of this kind of stress? Well, our scripture and our gospel readings today suggest that it is possible to be at deep peace, even in the midst of a world that is in chaos, even in the midst of uncertainty, even in the midst of tragedy. It's possible to find peace. The scripture readings from Isaiah are always quoted in this time of the year when we talk about preparing the way for the Lord. And in most of the Gospels, the beginning of the story is with John the Baptist out in the wilderness quoting that scripture saying, "Prepare the way of the Lord." In Luke, we get a little bit of the backstory, which is interesting because Luke, if you'll pay attention over the next year, this year we get to hear a lot of Luke's voice in our lectionary readings. And I like to think of Luke as kind of the UCC writer of the gospel because Luke's gospel is intentionally more inclusive, particularly of women, than the other gospel stories. You'll notice that in many ways throughout the gospel of Luke. Whenever there's a parable that's told, you'll hear one about two men went walking down the street or something and had a conversation. Then the next parable will be about women and what they're going through. So Luke intentionally was kind of the open and affirming or inclusive gospel of the times. And today we hear about the peace that the prophet speaks of and how it relates to two women, Mary and Elizabeth. And let me ask, if you remember the context, what happens before Mary is out on the road walking to visit Elizabeth? Is there anything unusual or exceptional that happened in her life recently? She had an appearance from Angel Gabriel in a dream that explained that she would be with child. Now, that news was unexpected. She was engaged, we are told, but she had not yet been with her husband-to-be, and yet she finds that she's pregnant. And so we're told that Joseph thought of dismissing her privately in order to not face the shame that he would and that she might as an unwed woman who was pregnant, but instead, the angel also spoke to him, and he decided to stand by her side. Yet he didn't go with her to visit her cousin Elizabeth. There's no Joseph in today's scripture reading. Mary is seeking to go find an ally. She's going to her cousin's house. She needs a safe space with a woman she knows who can relate to what she's going through, and Mary courageously goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth. How did they manage to find peace in the midst of that circumstance? Elizabeth was advanced with age, and yet when Mary came to visit her, the baby leapt in Elizabeth's womb, and she gave this glorious greeting. I kind of imagine Elizabeth as one of those people who was like one of our greeters, who just welcomes you no matter the circumstance and is happy to see you and can see the joy in whatever it may be, right? So Mary knew that she needed some Elizabeth time in her life. Does that make sense? And when she showed up, she was welcomed and rejoiced. And the phrase that Elizabeth says with a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. Bendito eres entre mujeres y bendito el fruto de tu vientre, Jesús." The words that became the Hail Mary. That's how sacred this moment is that we hear about in today's scripture. Now, how can we find peace like this in the midst of the chaos in our lives? I'm sure everyone has experienced a certain amount of uncertainty, chaos, struggle, loss, grief in your life. But when have you experienced peace? What has helped you find that, no matter what the circumstance? I can remember one of the very first times in my life that I found peace in the midst of what was a kind of chaotic time. This was middle school. Any of our middle schoolers still here? There we go. We got a middle schooler. Some of them might have gone with classes, but middle school, I don't know. For me, it was a little bit of a chaotic time. I had been trying to fit in with the popular kids, but then didn't really fit in, and then found some new friends. And in the midst of all that, my mother got sick with cancer, and my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So everything just seemed to be a little bit weird, right? And I didn't really know how to process it, and we eventually moved to a new house because my mom needed to be on one level because she had broke her hip with multiple myeloma cancer, so that was a change. 8th grade, I'm in a new house. I'm trying to make sense of all of this, right? And yet, my mother, in the midst of her struggle with cancer, started to prioritize her spiritual life. She really just knew that she had a limited amount of time and she was going to focus on spiritual practices. And so she was going to spiritual direction. She started to get trained as a spiritual director, even while she was sick with cancer, and she went on retreats. At one point, after going through treatment and having her hip replaced and recovering and having chemotherapy, my mom went to Commonweal Retreat Center in California. Now, mind you, we grew up in Iowa, right? My mother went to a retreat center for people with cancer in California, and you know, those folks in California are a little bit out there, right? A little bit like kind of, I don't know, they had her doing stuff like meditation, you know, like silence, like, I don't know, those California folks, it was kind of weird. But my mom went out there and had a great time, even in the midst of her cancer, and she came back to share with her family, or to share with her 8th grade son, who was a little angsty sometimes. She said, "You know what? We learned about this meditation while I was on this retreat. You might want to try it out sometime." She gave me a video, a VHS video. I put it in the VCR and watched it, and it was Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk, leading retreats on finding peace in every step. How many of you have heard of Thich Nhat Hanh? He was an amazing teacher. He passed recently, but for years, for generations, he taught about how to find peace, and not just how to be at peace in the midst of like a nice, safe church service like this, how to be at peace in the midst of war. In Vietnam, he was a monk when the nation was consumed with war, right? He was later exiled because he was teaching peace in the midst of a country that was at war, and yet he was remarkable. When he came to the U.S., do you know who he sought out to teach and lead retreats? Veterans. Veterans who had served in Vietnam, who were also struggling with their own demons. And he found that he had a gift to share both with victims of war and those who were the victims of being perpetrators in war, and he taught them peace at every step. So I watched this video, and it was all about being in the present moment, right? Then my mom sent me to a church retreat with a church I didn't really know that well. She just thought it would be good, and they sent me off to this weekend retreat. But I had watched the video before going, and it told me just to be present in the moment and focus on my breath and to live in the present moment. And for 3 days, I kid you not, I just had this experience of being really present. Like I was just breathing. I felt like I'd entered into like a time warp or something, because I was just present. And I think that's the last time I was at peace. No, just kidding. That was where I experienced peace in the midst of a chaotic time, and that showed me that it's possible, right? But how could somebody like Mary find peace in the midst of her circumstance? Now that's next level. That is a deeper type of peace. I don't know how she did it, and you might wonder, is it even possible for a woman who finds herself pregnant without support to find a peace so profound that it can give birth to something that will change the world? Isn't that incredible? I had an experience in my life of meeting someone who I felt like was a modern day Mary, a Mexican Mary, Maria. When I was in my 20s, I remember I was learning Spanish, and to practice my Spanish, I was talking to a waitress at this cafe that made these great juice, like fresh juices, right? And I kind of liked this one cashier, and so I practiced my Spanish, and I got to know her. I remember she even told me at one point she was going to Mexico and that she wasn't sure if she'd be back, because she was undocumented. But she didn't seem too stressed about it. She said, I want to go for my brother's wedding. I'll probably be gone for a few months, and I'll find my way back. And I was kind of amazed. How was she going to do that? But she knew she would find a way. When she came back, I was really happy that she made it back. And, I asked her out on a date. So we went out to a movie. We had a good time. And, things were going along well. Later, we met up again and got to know each other a little bit more. She shared she really wanted to have children. I said I do too. I was kind of thinking maybe not yet. I'm in my early 20s. But it was going along well, and we kissed goodnight. And the next time I saw her, she showed up distraught. She was crying. She was inconsolable. And she shared with me, I'm pregnant. And I thought, it certainly wasn't me. We just shared like a peck on, like a goodnight kiss, right? What had happened is she had gone out with her friends to a club on Valentine's night, and a friend from high school bought her a drink. And that's the last thing she remembered of that night. Her friend told her the next day that she might want to get a pregnancy test because some things had happened. And a few weeks later, she did, and found out that she was pregnant after we had gone out on these dates. And I was a little bit taken aback. I wasn't sure what to do, and she was really, really not sure what to do in this moment. And I just wanted to be supportive, and so I let her know that there are options. And I remember I helped her set up an appointment with Planned Parenthood in order to just have some counseling and explore what her options might be. She hadn't even thought of that. And I think I even offered to take her there, but she said, no, I can go. it was about a month before I saw her again. And when I did, she showed up. She was completely at peace. She was smiling. She was grounded. She was at peace. And I was really happy to see that. And she shared, I went to the appointment, and that's when I knew that this baby is a gift from God. And I'm keeping my baby. I wanted a baby. God's giving me a chance to have a child, and I know God will support me. She was at peace in the midst of that uncertainty. And she even shared, I've started a tamale making business, and I'm selling tamales before I go to work to all the workers that are waiting at the bus stop because I'm going to support this child. And I was amazed. I was blown away. I had met a modern day Mary who transformed my idea of how to deal with that situation and found a deeper peace. So my prayer for all of you during this season is whatever you're going through, whatever is going on in your life, that you may find the deeper peace that comes from being connected to God.